Hello guys, I hope you are doing well. In this presentation, I will be talking about language aptitude. The previous presentation was about language attitudes. Now we will see language aptitude. So let's see the outline of the presentation. So first, we will see an introduction about the topic. Then we will discuss the components of language aptitude and the importance of language aptitudes. Then factors influencing language aptitude and how we assess language aptitude and best practices. Then finally, the micro cheat sheet. So first, what is language aptitude? Language aptitude refers to an individual's inherent capacity or potential to learn and understand languages efficiently and effectively, meaning that there is something inherent and there is a potential to learn and understand languages. So, in other words, some people might learn languages like efficiently and effectively more than the other ones, and some people might struggle when it comes to learning languages even though they make the same effort and they practice languages, or they practice language learning in the same way. However, some might find it easier to grasp concepts, and some might find it difficult. Also, it encompasses a range of cognitive abilities and skills that contribute to the process of acquiring, comprehending, and using languages. But when it comes to cognitive abilities, here we talk about like processing information and let's say cognitive styles. There is different types of cognitive styles. We find the holistic analytical, which refers to focusing on details or the bigger picture, and there is the reflective impulsive style, which reflect deeply before responding or being more impulsive. And there is the field dependence independence, which is the ability to separate details from the background context, and more, of course. Let's move on to see the components of language aptitude. First, we find phonetic coding, grammatical sensitivity, memory, and the analytical ability. First, what is phonetic coding? Simply put, phonetic coding refers to the ability to perceive and produce the sounds of a language accurately. So, what is the significance of phonetic coding? People with strong phonetic coding abilities can easily differentiate between sounds that might not exist in their native language, enabling better pronunciation and understanding of a new language. In other words, some languages have, let's say, similar sounds or sounds that might not exist in their native language. So people with strong phonetic coding or strong phonetic abilities can differentiate between these sounds. Of course, uh, the difference will show in pronunciation. For example, someone with high phonetic coding skills might find it easier to distinguish between similar sounds in languages like the rolled R in Spanish versus the non-rolled R in English. For example, we find in Spanish we find caro or rosa. So in English we find car or rose. So in the Spanish language, somehow like they multi they multiply the pronunciation of the R, so they pronounce rosa, carro. So this difference between the rolled and the non-rolled R This is what we mean by phonetic coding. Okay, so moving on to grammatical sensitivity. Of course, this component involves understanding the structure, rules, and patterns of grammar within a language. Of course, there is different grammars. There is a difference between the English grammar, Spanish grammar, and the French grammar, and this grammatical sensitivity makes you aware of or makes you more competent when it comes to understanding grammar rules. Of course, individuals with strong grammatical sensitivity can grasp how sentences are formed, conjugate verbs correctly, and use proper syntax. In other words, people with strong grammatical sensitivity will find it easier to understand grammar, syntax, and of course, conjugate verbs, and overall use sentences correctly. Example, someone with high grammatical sensitivity might quickly recognize and apply complex grammar rules such as verb conjugation or sentence structure in a new language. And someone with low grammatical sensitivity will find it difficult to recognize and apply complex grammatical rules, overall verb conjugation or sentence structure in a new language. Let's move on to see the part of memory. Of course, memory in language aptitude refers to the ability to retain and recall vocab, grammar rules, and language patterns. So, good memory skills aid in retaining new words and phrases, making it easier to recall them during conversation or writing. So people with strong or with good memory skills will find it easier to will find it easier or will be more competent when it comes to speaking and writing and using the new words that they retained in conversation or in writing. Of course, individuals with a strong memory for languages might remember vocab after hearing or seeing it just a few times, facilitating faster learning. So, some individuals might practice or might, let's say, recite like vocab, and even after spending hours and hours repeating the same vocab, they might struggle to grasp all the concepts, but people with strong memory will obviously uh, recall it after just like few minutes, of course, and overall it will facilitate their learning process. Moving on to the analytical ability. What is analytical ability? Analytical ability involves understanding relationships between words, phrases, and linguistic concepts. In other words, it helps in deducing meaning from context, understanding nuances, and making connections between different elements of a language. Let's see an example. Someone with high analytical ability might easily recognize word roots or patterns shared across multiple languages, aiding in learning new vocab more efficiently. In other words, someone with a high analytical ability will have, let's say, will be more competent when it comes to morphology. Of course, when we mean word roots or patterns, we mean prefixes and suffixes. Of course, some patterns are shared across multiple languages, and for example, let's take French and English. Of course, they have some similarities, and people with high analytical ability and people that are competent in English and French will obviously will for example, someone that is competent in French will find it easier to grasp English because he has high analytical ability. And let's move on to see importance of language aptitude. Of course, there is many advantages of or many things that make language aptitude important. One of which is language learning facilitation. So individuals with like uh, a good language aptitude, as we discussed before, we told like we discussed like memory, analytical ability, grammatical sensitivity. People with good language aptitude will learn languages easily. And when we talk about language learning facilitation, we mean that they will be competent not in one language or two languages, but in four or five, even five languages. That's what we are talking about. People with good low or bad language aptitude will mostly somehow fail to be competent in different languages. They might master a language or two, but they will somehow fail at mastering more than let's say three languages. Okay, so let's see the academic and career advantages. So when we talk about academic and career advantages, for example, people with a good language aptitude will obviously be able to to travel across the globe, and they will obviously be able to understand different concepts from different languages, meaning that they will in a way or another be or become competent researchers. That's what you are talking about in academia. The thing is, uh, you need to be insightful and you need to be aware of different perspectives. And in order to be insightful and aware of different perspectives, you need to be competent in different languages. And this doesn't come at ease. You need to have a good language aptitude. So also it will have career advantages when we talk about salaries, when we talk about positions. Let's take for example someone who is competent in only one or two languages. He will probably fail at gaining a good or a very good position. He will probably stick to a mediocre job because he is not competent in three, four languages. But on the other hand, someone with good language aptitude, he will mostly succeed in gaining a very good position with a very good salary, of course. Moving on to the cultural understanding. So when we talk about cultural understanding, we talk about intercultural competence. The thing is, if you have a good language aptitude, you will be aware of different cultures, and you will be competent in different languages. And what comes with that is uh, you will be aware of the culture of the other ones and your own culture, of course. And this will provide you with different perspectives. You will be emotionally intelligent, and of course, yeah, of course, when it comes to communication, it will help you a lot. Moving on to, so we discussed this language learning facilitation, academic and career advantages, uh, cultural understanding. Now let's move on to see factors influencing language aptitude. So first, let's see genetic predispositions. So, of course, there is some genetic factors that might influence an individual's inherent ability to learn languages. So, when we discussed before, we discussed earlier memory, analytical ability, grammatical sensitivity, phonetic coding. All these components are somehow or another related to genetic predispositions. Some people might have inherent ability to learn languages. I've seen people that are competent in more than 5 languages. They are genetically prepared to learn more than 5 languages. And some people might be bad at learning languages, even though they make the effort, they use the correct let's say the correct methodology to learn a language, but they somehow fail at learning different languages. uh, moving on to uh, um, moving on to environmental factors. In this part I want to talk about my own experience when it comes to environmental factors, things that I witnessed, things that I saw, and my own experience. So when it comes to environmental factors, I've been lucky to have an internship at Montessori Primary School, and also when it comes to SF, the internship related to SF, I've had the chance to teach middle school students, third grade, second grade, and first grade. Let's compare between the two schools, a public school, a public middle school, and a private primary school. Honestly speaking, students in Montessori primary school, they were competent, even though they had like 7, 8, 9 to 10 years old. Okay, they had good language acquisition. They had all the equipments needed to learn languages. Obviously, they will acquire it subconsciously, and it will come easier than students at public middle schools, where they struggle when it comes to basic English, like somehow they will have to learn languages consciously. They surpassed the critical period hypothesis, the critical period. So they will need to learn it consciously. Unfortunately, they will have to double the efforts. Like I honestly struggled when it comes to teaching them English basics, like writing, speaking. They really they didn't acquire the language, and this creates a huge challenge for us, for educators. Uh, but on the other hand, students in private primary schools, they acquired languages, and when they become teenagers, adults, they will obviously surpass average students. Okay, moving on to motivation. So when we talk about motivation. We talk about things that make you motivated to learn a language. Of course, for us students at SF, we are motivated to learn the English language in order to teach students. Some people are motivated to learn languages in order to travel abroad. Some are motivated to learn languages because it is a prestige. Some people are even motivated to learn a language to get a promotion, to get a higher salary. There is many motives that make people learn languages. And moving on to the last point, which is effort. When we talk about effort is the most important factor above all, or above all what we talked about. Effort makes the difference. Even though you didn't acquire the language, you didn't learn the language very early on, but you are very motivated and you are able, or you are ready to push in the effort. This will make the effort on the on the, like, let's say, on the longer run. You will you will see the difference between someone who is pushing the effort and someone who acquired the language very early on, and he somehow didn't push in the effort. Like, let's say, on the longer run, we will see the difference. He might surpass someone who didn't acquire the language but put in the effort. He might obviously surpass students who acquired the language and didn't push in the effort, of course. Moving on to assessment or assessing language aptitude. How do we assess language aptitude? We assess language aptitude using two things: tests and assessments, and self-assessment strategies. Let's see first tests and assessments. The most famous tests or assessments are modern language aptitude tests, known as MLAT, and Pimsleur language aptitude battery, PLAB, and Oxford placement test, OPT, and of course self-assessment of language skills. When we talk about modern language aptitude tests, it is a standardized test designed to measure an individual's aptitude for learning a foreign language. It assesses various components like grammar, phonology, and ability to infer grammatical rules. Uh, When it comes to PLAB, it evaluates auditory ability, memory, and analysis of sound patterns. And for the Oxford placement test, it is often used by language schools and institutions. It assesses a learner's grammar and vocab knowledge to determine their appropriate language proficiency tests. Moving on to self-assessment of language skills, we have very famous, let's say, tests. First, we find the IELTS, the TOEFL, and the TOEIC tests. We have, like, in 2023, we find even free tests or free assessments that give you free certification, and it is uh, somehow like well known between the between companies, and somehow they are reliable because they test your listening and speaking, your reading skills, even your writing, and it gives you a score, and based on the score you'll be either intermediate, beginner, or advanced, let's say, advanced in English, in the English language. So, moving on to self-assessment strategies. So, when we talk about reflective analysis, we talk about reflecting on your personal experience, or your own personal language learning experience. So, when we talk about reflective analysis, we simply say having a journal, writing down your notes, like, let's say, practicing English language learning, and then when you do all this stuff, you of course reflect on it analytically, and you see where you find difficulties, where you find it easier to learn a language, and based on these reflections, you you somehow you can improve your language learning process. Okay, when it comes to language learning diaries, it's somehow the same. You use a journal, and you track your progress overall. You see the challenges you faced, and of course achievements. Moving on to utilizing online resources. Nowadays we have multiple online resources. We have let's say Grammarly to assess writing. We have Udly to assess speaking. We have many platforms that will provide instant feedback uh, to your language skills. Moving on to uh, setting goals and checking progress. Um, In other words, it means that you should set a goal. For example, this year in 2023 or in 2024, I want to achieve C2 or C1 language proficiency. And then you see your progress. Are you progressing? How are you progressing? Are you putting time or limits or time limits to your language learning process? Are you progressing or not? And reflecting analytically on your progress. Moving on to seeking feedback. Of course, when it comes to seeking feedback, nowadays somehow you don't need let's say an educator or an English language teacher to give you feedback. Somehow you can be more independent, and when it comes to your writing and speaking, obviously writing and speaking, they are productive skills, and you will need just to write an essay, and you can go to Grammarly, for example, and Grammarly will provide you with let's say will provide you with instant feedback. Let's say, for example, I will show you a report that I made using Grammarly, the importance of healthy eating habits. It was an essay, a four-paragraph essay that was written by me, and uh, as you can see, we have metrics. So writing issues, you score, and you see writing issues, correctness, determiner use, common misuse, improper formatting, pronoun use. As you can see, you have all the things that all the weaknesses that you should improve, that you should work on. They are put here, or they are shown using Grammarly. As you can see, it can even improve your vocab or your word use, as you can see, guys. Like it is even replacing words with better words. I think it's a better tool to improve your writing. um, and of course, when it comes to speaking, I personally suggest using Udly, and it will give you instant feedback. Somehow you can use, like, there is some apps that I've been working on, and I've been, like, as you can see, there is some apps that you can, like, using your microphone, you can,
Go
like,
on to the next word.
see, are you pronouncing your words correctly, or are you talking well? As you can see, guys, you can even, like, do role plays and dialogues, and of course it will improve your speaking. Anyway, going back to the presentation, we've been talking about seeking feedback. Now we will move to immersion. So enhancing language aptitude. So first, how to enhance language aptitude. Immersion. When we talk about immersion, we talk about pushing oneself in an environment where the target language is spoken extensively. Immersion. For us students in SF, we don't have an environment, let's say, we have only the classroom to practice. We can practice it in groups, but other than this, it is rare to find environments that contain English language use. And for the strategies, you can use your even your TV. or you're you can watch movies, you can watch shows, and it will help you in learning the language, even though you are not living in an you are living in a non-native language, non-native country. Other than this, we find practice. Of course, practice is very important. Practice in speaking, practice in listening, practice in reading, writing. You can practice it by reading books, by watching English content, by talking to native speakers, and you can practice it using the methodologies that I use. For example, I use Udly, I use Easy Language Learning, Grammarly. These are all apps that makes you a more independent learner. Exposure. When we talk about exposure, we talk about exposing oneself to diverse mediums and contexts. For example, let's say attending events, attending or consuming media, using apps, websites, etc., etc. Use of technology, as we discussed before, you can use easy learning. You can use, of course, the most famous language learning apps, for example, Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, Udly, and the list goes on and on. Of course, we will move to strategies for effective language learning. So before we move on to the strategies for effective language learning, I want to show you guys a uh, uh, very important concept that most English language teachers should be aware of. So I've been writing on the board. I will move to the board, and yes, that's it. So the concept is called the plateau stage. Okay, the plateau stage is a stage where period during which the learner stops learning. So in other words, let's put it into practice. While learning a language, the transition from A2 to B2 is honestly, it will be fast. But the transition from intermediate to advanced is a lot more difficult. This is where the plateau stage is. So the transition from B2 to C1 is a lot more difficult than A2 from B2. And here we should be aware of of the plateau stage, and we should use certain things to improve English language learning. So let's see. Uh, let's go back to the presentation. So going back to strategies for effective language learning, we find setting goals. Of course, you need to have clear objectives, and when it comes to setting goals, we have some people want to achieve C2 language proficiency. Some people want just to have language or vocab knowledge, and some people want to be able to hold conversations and topics about different subjects. Another thing, which is embracing mistakes. So I will talk a bit about how to deal with the plateau stage specifically. First, you as an English language teacher, you need to go back to the basics. First, you need to give honest feedback. Of course, it will cost you something, which is hurting their ego. Of course, giving honest feedback will always hurt your students' ego, but of course, to achieve success, you need to sacrifice something. And the third thing, which is training students to focus on the bigger picture. To achieve a certain success, you must pay the cost of discipline. And fourth, you must embrace their past success. You need to recall their past success. And last thing, which is setting clear objectives. We talked about this earlier. engaging with native speakers. You can engage with native speakers with the social media apps and with using Zoom, using Google Classroom, using whatever medium you can find. Consistency. When we talk about consistency, we talk about maintain a regular schedule. You need to put in the effort, but you need to put it on the same scale every day or every week. You shouldn't be like consistent in 2 weeks, but you stop being consistent in the let's say on the other weeks. You need to be consistent. You need to have a regular schedule, and you need to practice it on a specific time, and you need to specify a certain place. Motivation. We talk about motivation. You need to find intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, whether it is a personal interest, career advancement, travel aspirations, or connection with others. You choose whatever motivates you to learn the language. So I think that this is the end of the presentation. I hope it was informative, and I see you. Let's and I see you guys in the next presentation.